Welcome to this week's episode of Terrible at Fishing with Michael Ruffino and a new special co-host, Ken Sandusky. Well, this is this week's fishing report. We are well into warm water fishing. That means for trout fishing, you will be going deeper in the 20 to 30 foot range for rainbow trout. Try to use that water bobber or bubble bobber. Fill it with water with a 3 to 5 foot leader with power bait. Let it sink and start pulling them in. This is a very, very successful method in order for you to catch the rainbow trout. As for the bass, we're starting to see lake surface temperatures at 70 degrees and up. That means top water fishing. So use your walking baits, your wake baits, your whopper ploppers, your poppers, anything that can disturb the surface of the water and start catching those smallmouth and largemouth bass. This is really a fantastic week. July is my favorite month of fishing. If you want to catch some kokanee salmon, those fish are going to be very, very deep. We're looking 40 to 50 feet down, so you're going to need a downrigger and use that and troll along those deep sections. At Immigrant Lake, those crappie are hitting. In fact, crappie are hitting everywhere, but I love Immigrant, as you all know. And as for Lake of the Woods, you can catch a ton of crappie, just not a lot in the big size like you can at Immigrant. Have fun out there, and remember, check out my YouTube channel, Terrible at Fishing, for visual instructions. All right, welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. This is Michael Ruffino, and I got my co-host now. I know it's a co-host. That's because you guys got tired of listening to me. And I got tired of listening to just me. My wife said I talk too much. So Ken Sandusky is going to be my co-host now. And so, Ken, tell everybody in Klamath Falls where you're from, which I already know that, and what you're doing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm from Klamath. Went to Riverside grade school, Ponderosa and KU. OIT too. Can't leave that out. I worked for a long time for the Forest Service as a public affairs officer. And recently went to work for the Modoc Nation. Those are the Modocs who got removed to Oklahoma after the war, the Modoc War down at the lava beds. I am a Oklahoma Choctaw enrolled, but have been in Klamath and around the area my whole life, basically. So it was kind of a pretty cool little deal to be able to go to work for the Modocs who are, originally from here, but also were removed to Oklahoma. Manage a ranch down at Sheepy Ridge and do other kind of government to government type work for the Modoc Nation as they look to reestablish their stake in the homelands here. I live down here in Modoc County now. Been fishing since I could walk. My dad was a creek fisherman, and I always say my granddad, people know as Sandy Sandusky. He was great at fishing, not so good at catching. So I really learned how to enjoy myself when the fish weren't biting. The biggest secret my grandpa taught me. Of course, my mom's family was into that too. Kenny Pound is my uncle. That's who I was named after. He died before I was born, but the rest of that family was real gung-ho to take us out fishing anytime we wanted to go. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Faganello clan either, because Frank and Ronnie would scoop us up and take us camping, and we're talking warm water today, so that's how I cut my teeth on crappie out at Gerber, was with the Faganello clan.
Gerber's a good lake for crappie right now. Also, big perch. Actually, the reservoir is only like 40%, I think, right now. So, but at least it's not two reservoirs like it was last year. It was like two ponds instead of one lake. So, yeah. But I love crappie fishing. I mean, my favorite crappie lake is Immigrants over in Ashland, and those are big old crappie.
Yeah, that it's so hit and miss around here at Gerber, and then down here in Modoc County, where some years it's just banner, and then others you can't scare any up. So immigrants are nice to have there because it's a little more consistent.
Yeah, it is. You know, another lake that I love just below Gerber, it's Willow Valley.
Yeah. Mhm.
Have you ever fished it?
Yeah, yeah. They when they were rescuing the fish out of Topsy before the dam removal, they took all those that they caught of warm water species out there. So I'm hoping we get a bump in the population out there. I've also noticed it's stayed a little more full the last few years than usual. I don't know if they're managing it different or what, but I haven't seen it go really low like it used to when I was younger.
Willow Valley's sort of one of those. I don't know. It's a badly kept secret, but for big bass. So bass fishermen, they don't like talking about Willow Valley because that's kind of their secret spot. And so the Willow Valley, I mean, one time I went out there, it was snowing on me. I was in my kayak and I caught two personal bests back to back. I mean, oh man, it was so good. That was a good day when you get two PBs back to back.
Yep. Yeah, I haven't ever got my boat out there. I need to put that on the list sometime soon.
That's a good one. I mean, Willow Valley is like nobody knows. People don't know about it because off the freeway, you got it. Yeah, off the highway, you got to go on, a logging road for like 10 miles or whatever, and it's dusty and it's dirty. And then when you get over to Willow Valley, it ain't much to look at. It's just not much. I mean, there ain't no trees out there really, and so you launch at this kind of, I don't know, Freddie Flintstone ramp, and you go out there to fish. But it is a fun lake to catch big fish, and it's only about how far is it from here? About an hour and a half from Fresno. I mean Fresno. I lived in Fresno for too long, but from here in Klamath Falls, so it's only an hour and a half. And if you're not catching something there, stop by Gerber and grab something there. It's on the way.
There's a bumphead reservoir out there. A lot more difficult to get to, but during wet times, that bumphead will hold some really good crappie too.
Oh, really? Never fished it. Never fished it. I remember one time when I first moved here, I wanted to fish all these things on the map. And so one time I went out to this one reservoir and I get out there and I launch and come to find out it's private. See, I don't know the difference between private and BLM and stuff
you're
like
at
that.
Wild Billy.
So, I mean, I just found it on the map and I went to it. And anyway, the guy was really cool. The guy was really, really cool. I always clean up after myself. I always leave the place cleaner than I found it. That's really his biggest worry, is that people would come to his little reservoir and they just trash it. And and I catch and release, so I always leave it, with the same amount of fish as that had it before. But he was actually a pretty nice guy, and I had no idea. I mean, I'm from California. I mean, I fished the Williamsons once, and I had this guy on a trailer yelling at me because he said it was closed. Like, how can you close a river? I mean, it's right here. So I'm on this river, and the guy's yelling at me because, and how does he know I ain't no indigenous person? I know I'm Italian, but I mean, I'm indigenous to some country. But anyway, he's yelling at me, and I had no idea that there was an open and a closed part of fishing for white people on the Williamsons. And I mean, when I moved here, I learned by getting yelled at, what was right, what was wrong. It's kind of like
I'm the one doing the yelling in the past where, people get a couple of fish up on the bank at Putnam's or something, and, they got to learn somehow, and it's a finite resource, and, we got to take care of it so we can have it for as long as possible in future generations. So they recently tightened the restrictions up there quite a bit. I'm not really happy about no bait fishing in Agency Lake. Takes away a lot of opportunity. And then, of course, the way they chopped up the Williamson and slowly over time have reduced our opportunity there too. But it is what it is. And, our fisheries are benefiting from it. They've stabilized really well in my adult life compared to the kind of boom and bust cycles we had in Klamath Lake when I was younger.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we all grow up by getting yelled at. So I mean, we rather ask for forgiveness than permission. But I was ignorant. I mean, I moved here, and Oregon's different than from when I grew up. I mean, where I grew up, I mean, we just fished wherever we could walk to, and people didn't yell at us.
You gotta have a law degree to understand the regulations in some cases.
Well, around here you do. Yeah, I mean, people have private reservoirs, and then there's certain parts of a reservoir, like was it Phillips? Is it Phillips Reservoir, or I don't know, I forgot. Some of it is available to launch on a BLM side, but then it's private on another side.
Yeah, Campbell's like that.
Campbell's, that's it. Yep. Yeah, Campbell's is like that. So you can only get to it from a certain side, but not from another side. And so I get in trouble. I get shot on the one side, and I'm okay on the other.
And there's a lot of effort among landowners, a lot of good landowners out there too, but a lot that have been burned who wish they could be good. But then that other end of that spectrum where they're putting no trespassing signs where they shouldn't, or, saying they own the lake or whatever. So, one of the things I kind of have hope to get out of my life with communications and writing fishing and hunting articles and stuff like that is just to kind of encourage people to behave themselves, but then also to try to expand overall opportunity for responsible anglers. Camel's one of those really poignant spots because off the dam is the best bank fishing, and it's really tough to launch a boat, especially when it's low over by the creek where Deming Creek comes in there, the diversion comes in, but the fishing's spectacular. So it's kind of tough not to be able to drive out to that dam and fish from the dam. So I'm sure he deals with a lot of trespassers there.
Well, I remember a young viewer of mine, Connery, and he told me, he says, I want to take you to my secret fishing spot. So he's a teenager, and his mom and dad didn't mind me stealing their child for a whole day. And so he takes me out to Campbell's. And 2 hours. I had no idea it was 2-hour drive. So I'm driving, 2 hours to this spot. I go, this better be a good spot. And when we get there, we launch and we're fishing by the dam, in the lake there. I caught zip. He caught one, and it was maybe a half-pounder. So you may say it's spectacular, but this year, although we went too early, it was still cold water. And I told him, I says, and it wasn't very deep. I mean, to be honest, the deepest spot I could find was like 18 feet. And so it wasn't very deep. And we were fishing this cold water area. And what am I going to catch? Zip. 2-hour drive, zip.
You might be interested to learn, and I'm probably going to kick myself for bringing this up on the radio, but there used to be, and I'm assuming there still are, kokanee in that lake.
Really?
The story is that the hatchery truck broke down a long time ago, and the cooler or something wasn't working, so they needed a place to put them, and they didn't expect them to survive, but they dumped a whole truckload in Campbell Reservoir. And, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, we were catching some of the biggest kokanee I've ever seen, 4 or 5 pounders, right alongside some of them bass in there. They had made it long enough at that point that I'm assuming they're still in there, at least a few.
Wow. Well, I don't know how to fish kokanee.
Biting the bass lures.
Huh?
They were biting the rattle traps we used.
Oh, were they?
Yep.
They were actually hitting the lipless, huh?
Yeah, yep.
Well, stay tuned for our next segment as we're going to continue talking about warm water fishing here in Klamath Falls. All right, welcome back to Terrible Fishing. We are now going to talk about why Ken and I like warm water, besides if we fall in. And we all know what happened to me when I fell in cold water. I practically died a couple of years ago. 40 minutes in cold water would kill most people, but I'm fat. And evidently that saved my life. So Ken, we got so much warm water right now. It's 72 degrees surface temp or better right now at Lake of the Woods, among other lakes. I mean, Willow Lake is doing good, Agate, Emigrant, all these. I mean, Hyatt, Howard Springs. I mean, everybody's got warm water. Why do we like warm water besides people like swimming in it?
You don't get bored when they're biting, right? The most action you can find.
Well, it is. It is. And that's the nice thing. I mean, I'm a bass fisherman, so bass are warm water fish. So in the winter, they go deep and they sleep, and they basically comatose. But now they come back up, and we've experienced what we call a turn in lakes. That inversion to where the cold water that was on top is now on the bottom, warm water on the bottom is now up on top, and that turn mixes all that the temperature of water. And all the fish are just going nuts. Some of them are in shock. Some of them are trying to find new homes, but some of them are enjoying the change of temp. So, and they're getting more and more food. So, I mean, I go to Lake of the Woods, and it's like it looks like everybody's pool. I mean, it's got all these. I know I shouldn't say this, but it drives me nuts that people leave their pool toys out in the lake or on the shore. I love the scenery. I don't want to see somebody's noodles out on the shoreline. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing noodles and then inflatables. Just take it back to your campsite. I mean, I'm good. I don't need to see a noodle. I don't know about you, but warm water, you see inflatables.
Yeah, the boater hatch at Lake of the Woods has gotten almost ridiculous at times these days in the summer, where there's really not much open water when the boats are all out there. It just can't handle the level of traffic it gets at times in the summer. The good thing about the bass and at Lake of the Woods, the smallies that they've introduced as, kind of relatively recently, when it gets that warm, they just have to eat. And so the activity doesn't necessarily shut them down like with the trout. You get that many boats going on a trout lake, you're not going to catch a fish. But with the bass and the other warm water species, they're ectothermic, so they have to eat. Their metabolism is so high because the water temperature's high that you're going to catch them even when the boats are crazy like that.
Yeah, I actually the smallies love the shoreline, especially around the Aspen area. And it's so funny with Friday, people are swimming. All right, they're in their little floaties and they're on the lake and they're swimming and hooping and hollering and then in between them I'm casting my bait, and it was at Friday, by the green gazebo right there is a pretty good spot for smallies too, and I casted my a walking bait, spook. And I'm popping them, boom, good old 3-pounder hit it. And so all these people are swimming around me or around it, and I'm fighting this 3-pounder, and I scoop it up, and they were like, one thing about bass, they are not shy. They don't let people scare them away.
Yep.
And so I can catch a bass 10 feet from somebody's feet, and they look at me like I'm crazy. We have swimming areas, they got them roped off. This is fishing and boating area. So, but it is a lot of fun. I mean, the bass, they're not afraid of people. I mean, you could catch them right next to somebody swimming. People can go underwater and give them a big old kiss.
Yep.
I usually give them a kiss anyway when I release them. So
a little Jimmy Houston action, huh?
I always do. My wife, I come home. She goes, "How many fish you kissed today?" I go, "I lost count. It was a harem."
I got worried for a long time about Lake of the Woods. I just mentioned that I never had smallmouth in it when we were younger, and it was kind of a largemouth and trout lake, lots of little perch through the ice usually, some crappie now and again. But then all of a sudden we started seeing a few smallmouth mixed in, and the rest of the fisheries just crashed. And I think what had happened was that, that kind of ecologic equilibrium was thrown off a little bit, the homeostasis in the lake, and kind of threw the populations out of whack for a minute. But it seems like that has reestablished and the fishing's coming back. I don't see the big, kind of 7-8 pound largemouths. I know they're still in there, but not as many. I don't think.
Definitely in there.
And it definitely has had a huge impact on the brown trout fishing from my perspective in the off season, the fall, and obviously ice fishing. And we don't have the luck we used to have on brown trout because they put them in as fingerlings, so they're probably great bait. The rainbows, they can grow to a keeper size or even what they call trophy trout. But with the brown trout all going in at fingerling size, I think that it's still having a little bit of an impact on the trout fishing up there.
Well, there's a video on my YouTube channel that you'll see me pull up out of the water 9-pound brown at Lake Woods. And they can get really, really big. I think our lake record's 33.25 inch. They get real big, but a lot of people, they don't understand that Lake of the Woods is not a natural trout lake. They just don't breed in that lake. I mean, you'll never see anything under a legal size. They just don't breed. And bass breed like crazy, so do perch and crappie. They just go nuts. And when I was doing my research on Lake of the Woods, it was like, I think it was, in 55, they sterilized the lake. And the earliest census on it was, and I think it's 42 or 44, and they had already been stocking it with trout for decades. And so nobody knows what original fish, if any, I mean, who knows? But after 55, the sterilization because of the sucker fish, they reintroduced trout and all this other stuff. And then the bass came in about 2000 and then the smallies. But they seem to thrive in the lake. The largemouth and smallmouth thrive. And I try to encourage people to, if you do keep bass, keep the 1 and 2 pounders, thin it out a little bit. Let the big ones get bigger and let the small ones become fodder. And so keep the 1 and 2 pounders, good eating. Bass is good old eating. But personally, I just always throw them back unless I damage them. But Lake of the Woods is an interesting, hatchery. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that rotenone. My buddy Billy Tenniswood works for ODFW and often talk about that strain of suckerfish that were in Lake of the Woods and how we would act differently now if about managing that population, considering the endangered status of the the other populations.
Yep. No, and a lot of people don't know that. In 55, that lake when they introduced what was it called? Roto something or other.
Rotenone, yeah.
Yeah, rotenone, and it just killed off everything in the lake. So a lot of old timers, they think it was a trout lake. It wasn't a trout lake. I mean, there are some catfish in that lake, not many, but go on the southern end this time of year, you can just see them in the mud. They're all over the place.
Yep.
I mean, if you want, I've never catfished in my life, but I mean, they sometimes hit trout bait and whatnot. That's just what they do.
Yeah, I don't have the facts, but there are some ideas that there was an endemic strain of red band in that lake before the heavy management went on. I've seen the kokanee up the creek there at the southeast corner trying to spawn. Of course, the browns and rainbows always try to spawn on the springs right in front of the lodge.
They try, yeah.
They're not very successful. The kokanee are spawning. The kokanee are reproducing in Lake of the Woods.
Well, they try. I mean, in October, they're all over the main ramp. but the eggs, very few, if any, hatch because there's no aeration, no turning of those eggs, and the water gets so cold so quick, and then it freezes up usually. But not a lot of sockeye salmon, actually, reproduce in the lake, but it is quite a sight. I mean, I love those 2 weeks in October to where, the browns will come up and hit them.
Mm-hmm.
So now the browns are in the shallows, and I have actual baits that I made just for October fishing, so I can catch those browns.
Yeah, we catch them through the ice too. There's been years where you can't get your lure down to the bottom. Kokanee will pick it up. They're not great eating at that time because they're kind of in spawn mode, but their colors get really interesting. Of course, then the big brown trout are right behind them, so that's what you're really after. Well, it sounds like you like Lake of the Woods. I tend to avoid it in the summertime and get up to Hyatt and Howard Prairie where the water play is a lot less, especially at Howard Prairie. Get a few water skiers, but not all that swimmer action like you do. Not a lot of more room to spread out up there too.
Yeah, I kind of I have to stay. I have a lot of health issues, and I have strokes that are fairly common. so I stick around where people are. So I fish Lake of the Woods. My watch actually will notify them if I'm in trouble. And it's safer for my health. Now, as much as I love Lake of the Woods, during the summer, I'm not crazy about all the people there. And you won't find me there on the weekends because it's just too much. And 4th of July, forget it. I mean, I'm not going to be there. I tried it last year, and that wasn't too good. But one time I was in my boat. I have a small inflatable boat. It's 12 and a half feet, 2-seater. It's a great fishing craft. But one year I was in my kayak and I was on oxygen. And so I had my oxygen generator in the boat in my kayak. And this speedboat just kept going around me, trying to create wakes. And, I basically only have one good lung. And because pulmonary embolisms kind of destroyed portions of my body. And so this guy's going around me. And I'm getting mad because he has no idea I've got a $3,000 oxygen generator. I'm on oxygen. You could tell I'm on oxygen, out in the middle of the lake. And this guy's trying to dump me in the water, which could have killed me. And so I try, and that's why in the last few shows, you kind of hear the annoyance of me on etiquette, being, that golden rule. And you don't know what's going to happen if you do something stupid like that. And so, yeah, Lake of the Woods can get pretty scary at times, but that's why I go midweek. I'm usually this week it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, but yeah, I'm there because of my health. If I go somewhere else, then somebody has got to know how to drive a stick shift because my truck's a stick. And know what to do and not freak out if I happen to have a small stroke, and not freak out about it. Or, one time I was on Willow Lake, I think it was last year, and I went there by myself, and my oxygen ran out on the other side. And it's not a big lake, but by the time I paddled, it was 2 years ago, by the time I paddled my kayak over to the boat ramp, I was in respiratory failure. And so campers, really nice people, loaded up my stuff, and I made it to the hospital. So, I got my issues. I'm loud. I'm a little obnoxious and very sarcastic, but sometimes things happen.
Yeah,
that's why I stay at Lake of the Woods and where there's a crowd.
That's a bad story. I can't believe people behave that way.
And neither could I. Well, stay tuned as we take this commercial break, and we're going to be back on warm water fishing in Klamath Falls. All right, welcome back to Terrible Fishing. Now that you guys all know about warm water fishing and some of my pet peeves, and Ken's, he likes to stay away from warm water, crowds. So
Religiously.
he, I just, I wave and smile at everybody on the shore, and they always say, "You're terrible at fishing." I go, "Yeah, I'm terrible at fishing." But both Ken and I love fishing in warm water. Ken, what's your favorite fish in warm water?
Oh, I love them smallies. They pull like no other.
It's
Of
the
course,
best fight.
I mean, you make me make a hard choice because the crappie. I like to release the crappie into hot oil. That's a fish taco.
Oh, people don't realize how good tasting crappie is,
Mm.
and it's an easy fish to clean. And so you can catch 50 of these things for a good old fish fry.
Yes,
But what a wonderful, you're right, fish tacos or on top of salads. I'm losing weight, so I eat a lot of salads. 32 pounds lost in 2.5 months. So I'm shooting for that 200. I was way over 300. Oh my goodness. I actually have a jawbone now, and my neck is starting to surface. So, but yeah, smallies are the best fighting fish, 3-1 over any other fish. If you catch a 1-pound smallie, it'll feel like a 3-pound largemouth. I mean,
that
it's
is
just
correct.
so much fun. The other day, I kind of hit a trifecta on Friday. I got a dink, half pounder, 1-pounder, 2-pounder, and the last fish of the day was a 3-pound smallie. And that was my trifecta right there. And I almost in order.
3 pounds smallie is something to hang your hat on for the day.
It's a
That's
biggie.
fish.
Oh yeah, and he made me fight for it. He ran on me, and I had to move my boat around, and so I had to chase him down a little bit because I was working on my medium at the time, and I have lots of rods. that was my medium with 12-pound fluorocarbon on it, and I didn't want to lose that lure because of one I made, and you're just fighting that thing. But he finally gave up. I let him run a little bit, and he finally gave up, and the people around me were like amazed. But that is the best fighting fish. I mean, hands down. I mean, although I think over at Lake of the Woods there's a state record largemouth, because I have hooked into double digits over there, and a buddy of mine's hooked into some pretty nice double digits. And double digit is 10 pounds or better, everybody. They're there. And so even though I love catching smallies, I throw big old giant 6 to 8 inch baits out there. And one time, the biggest bass I've ever hooked into broke surface on my 7.5 inch wake bait. And he exploded it was awesome. And I was ready. I pulled hard on that, and I set that hook as hard as I could, and he dove down into the woods, into the trees underneath, and was able to dislodge my hook. So I had to redesign my bait in order for a better hook set on it next time around. And that's the neat thing about making my own baits, is that I get to design. And if I do lose something because I don't think it was my fault, which it never is, it's all redesigned for a better hook and a better hook set. And so when I'm a big Gamakatsu hook guy. I love Gamakatsu hooks. And they're just about as sharp as I can get. So, I mean, there's VMC, and then there's I do put the owners on my big giant swim baits, the beast hooks. Those are 8/0. People think I'm
not laser sharp though.
They are razor sharp. And if you saw a video on my YouTube channel from last Friday, you'll see me catch that 2-pounder
Yeah.
on that 8-aught. I mean, largemouth has big mouths. That's why they're called largemouths.
Yep. Well, you mentioned state record. It's 8 pounds, 1.76 ounces, and you're going to have a hard time competing with Henry Hagg up there west of Portland.
Well, that's for a smallmouth, not a largemouth.
Okay. What's the largemouth record?
Yeah, largemouth's 13.4, I think. I think it's a 13.4 for our state record. And I know we've got a 13-pounder in that lake, at least one, because I've seen it, and so has Lynn. And we've both seen this fish out there. He's out there. And, I'm ready. If I land it, I got my measuring tapes, I got my scale, I got everything. We're gonna log that baby in.
So, yeah, 11.96 ounces. That's
is that what it is?
Got some of those around here, guaranteed.
We got them. There's some 12-pounders around here.
Gotta be.
There are, and we were just talking about Willow Valley. I wouldn't surprise me if some 12-pounders are in Willow Valley.
Oh yeah,
not at all, because you'll catch 4-pounders on a regular day out there. And that's kind of an average, is 4 pounds out there. So I my goal, I want to set the state record. I want to catch the state record on largemouth. I don't think you'd have to go to the Umpqua for a state record on smallmouth or something like that.
The Modoc County down here where I live record is 12 pounds, 3 ounces. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention all the warm water opportunities on the Devil's Garden.
Yeah,
just over the border. Us Jeffersonians, our fishing area is cut in half by having to buy an out-of-state license. And
well, I want to catch Oregon's biggest largemouth. That's my goal. See, people up here, it's always trout and salmon. And everybody fishes trout and salmon. That's what they do. And I'm a bass guy in trout country.
What about wipers? You been out to Anna?
What's a wiper?
The hybrid between a white and a striped bass. They used to plant them in more places, and you mentioned the Umpqua. You can still catch the ocean run down at the mouth of the Umpqua and the White River. And then there's a run up to Sacramento that has some 50-pounders. But one of the last places in Oregon that they stock these things is out at Anna Reservoir, kind of by Summer Lake.
Yeah,
it's a great trout fishery. Anna Reservoir and Anna River are a great trout fishery, but there's some 20-plus pound hybrid bass in there too. And of course, it's got the boater hatch in the summertime, but never freezes up in the winter. So if there's a good warm water opportunity in the winter, because the springs keep it at 58 degrees year round.
I love striper bass. I mean, striped bass are just, we used to take the boat and follow the boils. And a boil is where, the fish kind of hit the surface, for those who don't know. And it looks like the surface of the lake is boiling because there's a lot of surface strikes. And we would chase it, and we'd throw anything. I mean, you could throw your hat in the middle of that ring and catch a striped bass. I mean, it was so much fun. And they fight. Oh, what a great fight. Because they're big and they're so strong. But yeah, I haven't seen any, striped bass in Klamath. I don't think any. I haven't seen any. Do we have striped bass?
There's some rumors about some stripers, some wipers still in Klamath Lake, along with the sturgeon and other kind of, weird species that they used to stock way back when, that have a long enough lifespan to make it this long. But it's only been rumors from my perspective. There been some old boys when I was a kid who would swear up and down about this one spot, this one lure, and best sniper fishing you could find up here. But I don't know how true all that was.
I always love those guys. It's like you should have been here yesterday. And that's something else too, is that I will use my lures. I mean, I make all my lures, and you can buy them at the marina when they're available, although they're sold out at the moment. but I'll go and give them a few more tomorrow. The when I could throw the same lure, and somebody next to me can throw the same lure, but I'll catch and they won't. And a lot of people, they don't understand that throwing bait or lures out to out in the water, that's not the way you catch fish. It's the way you pull it back. And it's the presentation. It's letting it sink. It's going to a certain depth, doing some pauses on it maybe, or a straight retrieve, or doing stuff, doing just the right thing. And when I fish, I actually have to fish an area with different techniques and different depths in order to find out what's working. So it may take me an hour to catch my first fish, but once I dial it in, I know what I'm doing at that point. And people, when they fish, I don't want them to get frustrated. Like, I'm throwing what you told me to throw, Mike. Well, I go, you're not pulling it back the same way. And that's, I put this new set of lures that I'm giving to the resort. On the back of my card, I've got on how to retrieve it. So, this one says very slow retrieve with pauses.
There you go.
Now, you'll get these handwritten notes from me, all right, on how to, retrieve it. This one's a topwater. It says, great for bank fishing, pop and pause on retrieve. It's a popper. So it's just really, I'm hoping that people will listen to me. When I got a guide, I had to listen to my guide because I never steelhead fished in my life. So I had to listen to my guide because I'm a bass guy. I'm a stupid steelhead guy, but he knew what he was doing, and I did exactly what he was telling me.
My grandpa used to say, "You're not holding your mouth right." But, more seriously, piscivorous fish, so fish that eat a lot of minnows, which large bass are some of the most. Also, our red bands around here are highly piscivorous, but they just can't turn down a dying minnow. Something about that. Even fish that have a completely full gut will bite that dying minnow. It's just an instinct that you trigger. So that pause or that drop, that action you're imparting to any kind of lure you have on there, it's triggering those instincts that are just, they can't control themselves, especially with warm water fish when the water's warm, because their metabolism's so high. They got to take an easy meal when it comes, and a dying minnow, it's a way to go.
I have a type of retrieve that everybody uses, but I call it my sawtooth retrieve. And where you just throw it out there, you let it sink, you reel it in, and that'll make it come up into the water column a little bit. And then you just stop and let it fall again, and then reel it back up. And then it's sort of like these triangles you're creating in the water. And I call it my sawtooth retrieve. Probably some other buddy calls it something else, but that's what I call it. And a sawtooth retrieve is probably the most effective retrieve you can have on a bait, especially if you're working a soft bait like a worm or a Ned or something like that. You just want to bring it up, and down towards you. And if you do that, it will work. It always does. And during the summer, I'll catch 50 to 100 bass out there in Lake of the Wood. And people say, well, how'd you do? I go, I did okay. And because I don't want them to feel bad about their two. I ain't going to tell them. I stopped counting at 20. But it's the way you bring it back. Always the way you bring it back.
There's a trend I'm seeing among, just on the fishing network, where those jigging body baits, those flying lures, we use them through the ice and they swim around in a beautiful circle. But now they're casting those things out there and jigging them back, reeling them back. And that's exactly what's happening there. They got those flying tails on them. So when you pull it up, it's swimming in a direction. And then when you drop it, it's going straight back down. Or, in that little spiral. So that's exactly the kind of action you're talking about, that the lure imparts itself with. they're taking these jigging lures and turning them into casting lures just because of what you're talking about.
All right, welcome back to Terrible Fishing. Oh, we just love talking about fishing, Ken and I. So, but y'all like to catch cold water fish, don't you? Like this time of year, and so there are cold water in lakes, and there's cold water in rivers. So, Ken, you live in this area your whole life, and in California, I was born and raised in Santa Barbara, so cold water to us is the Pacific Ocean. We ain't got that here. So you got to have some tricks about catching cold water fish in warm water.
Absolutely. Well, you talked in the winter time, it's the opposite of what it is in the summer, and then you get the turnover and the mixing, and then that stratification reestablishes. So, any of these warm water lakes, and Lake of the Woods is a classic example. If you can get down below that thermocline where the cold and the warm water have established stratification, and get below it. And then, early and late in the day, wind action, the springs at Lake of the Woods can bring the trout in shallow even in the summertime. And then Lake of the Woods is one of the few places where you can fish at night. And if you're going to catch one of those big brown trout in Lake of the Woods, it's probably going to be at night this time of year.
Oh, yeah. And there a lot of people, again, locals probably know this, but most people don't understand that Lake of the Woods is a natural lake. It's not a reservoir. There's no dam. It's been fed by several springs, cold water springs, in the lake, at the bottom of the lake. And if you know where those cold water springs are, then you'll know where the congregation is of trout. There are two creeks that come in, but this is not high flow. Dry Creek and Rainbow Creek are not high flow. But if you know where those springs are, it's awesome. So I've been telling all of our viewers, about water bobbers, a bubble bobber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fill it with water, no air whatsoever, 5-foot leader with some powder bait. Just toss it out there and just wait because they're going to hit. I was out there on last Friday, a week ago now, and Scott, who's the best trout fisherman on Lake of the Woods I've ever seen, I think he caught like 45 that morning, because he had some people in the boat, and he always catches and releases. Although the kids, he doesn't reel in any of them. Basically, he lets all the children in the boat reel in the fish, and on my live, you saw two girls reel in like a 17 and an 18-inch trout, and it's just the water bobber works. He was working 20 to 30 feet on the drop off, and it seems to work. I mean, do you have another way of doing it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I love those bobbers. You just leave a little bit of air for bug and bubble or whatever, but using it as kind of a neutral buoyancy stinker, that's a great idea. I mentioned earlier the flying bait, so that jig and wrap. If I was at Lake of the Woods this time of year or one of those mountain lakes looking for trout, some vertical presentation when it's not too windy, so good way to go. We used to fish with downriggers a lot in Klamath Lake just to keep the weeds off of the lure, and then we'd have those on when we get into the mountains, and you can do little circles with the downriggers down there. Lake of the Woods is tough because there's some abrupt changes, so you got to be really careful. But if you're at Fish Lake, 4 Mile is a great place for downriggers, and of course those lakes, 4 Mile and Lake of the Woods, have kokanee in it, and if you can get on top of the kokanee, even in the dead of summer, 75 feet or so, you can catch them all day in one spot.
Yeah. Now, I had never ever thought about using a water bobber or bubble bobber, whatever they're called. I call it a water bobber, but I think they're called bubble bobbers. But I never thought about it until Scott. Scott actually told me about it. And when you fill that thing with zero air in it, just submerge it. It's a slide weight too. water bobbers are a slide weight. So there's absolutely no resistance on your line. So as soon as that trout hits that bait, and it is a neutral buoyancy to a point. It'll just sit right on top of the weed bed, and then your bait is floating above it. It gives it action, and you don't have to touch it. But he also recommends to give it some slack, because as soon as that trout hits it, he's going to run with it and set his own hook, and you just pull him up. I mean, it is amazing, how good Scott is. I've seen him do 100 trout days. I find trout fishing boring until I like hooking a trout. I just hate waiting for him to hook himself. To me, that's boring. I can't do that. I have a 2-rod license, but I can't do 2 rods. I only have a 2-rod license for 5 rods in the winter. That's the only reason for ice fishing. But I need to feel the bite. I have to have my hands on the rod. And not Scott, man. He just puts 2 out and 2 on, for the kids, and pull them in. You'll see a trout break surface, and he goes, up, little Timmy, reel it in. It is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And that's why I say trout are stupid. Don't they hit anything? I've caught trout on lipless cranks. I've caught them on square bills. I've caught them on, I think they just hit anything that's pretty that swims by their face. No offense to all the trout fishermen.
You can trigger them. They're going to, the trout are cold-blooded, and so, they need to eat even more than the bass when the water gets a little warm. If they get down there in the deep water where it's extra cool, then they are tougher to get to bite, because when the water's cold water fish are less likely to bite because they're going pretty much dormant, their metabolism.
Yep, they do.
And I know you get down to the bottom of Lake of the Woods and you're seeing a 30-degree temperature shift down there versus what's on top.
Yep. No, and I always, although the stocking schedule is pretty much paused at the moment because of the warm water, but I always tell my listeners and viewers to chase the legal size stockings, because when you chase, they put 1,000 legals into a lake. What comes up? Anything that eats them. Here's an 8-inch bait fish that they're throwing out there. And then a largemouth is going to come up, a brown trout's going to come up, and they swallow these things, man. And they just go up and they start feeding on them. And so whenever I find a school of smaller fish, I know that there's probably some bigger fish sort of hunting them. And legal size trout is just a delicacy.
Well, you got your finger on something that down there, your neck of the woods where you come from in California, they throw those big old body baits, swim baits that look like stalker trout. They cost about $50 each for a cheap one, but that's how they catch those, those 20-pounders down in Southern California. I don't see a lot of that up here. I know a few guys who carry them. I've had them in my tackle box, but who wants to throw a $50 lure into the weeds, but that's what you're talking about there as far as matching that hatch is some sort of big rubber body bait.
I got a big one right here, but you're right. I throw big giant baits in the water. And there was one of my favorite things that Len actually gave it to me as a bait retriever. So, I usually use like a slow sink or a fast sink glide bait. And these are hand painted by, they're $50 baits. You're right. They're $50. Last thing you want to do is lose a $50 bait. And so this thing, it's like a weight that you attach to your line, and it slides all the way down your line with these chains that dangle, and it gets down to your lure, and it's got its own strong string, and you're just wiggling it until it catches a hook, and then you just yank that hook right out of the log. And it's great because you don't lose a $50 bait. And
Yep.
people will, I do paint $50 baits, and we've sold them, and it's just, but they're a special request. I mean, it's not like I have a inventory of $50 baits, but my boat definitely has them, and I throw them, and you will, big baits catch big fish. It's
Yep.
just the way it is. I mean, you can't, but you're not going to catch as many. I mean, I throw, my swim baits with an 8/0 hook. Well, a quarter-pound bass ain't going to hit that, and because their mouth ain't big enough. It's an 8/0 hook, and I've got a bait over here with a 10/0 hook on it.
Yep. I haven't ever carried one of those lure rescuers, though I've considered it many times. And lures are getting more and more expensive, and with inflation and stuff. So one technique that saved me like literally thousands of dollars over the years, that whole kind of bow and arrow technique. So if you're snagged up, get a reel down tight on your lure, and then pull it even tighter to get some bend in your rod, and flip your bail and hold it until you get it really tight. Then just let it go and reel it up real quick again.
Right.
And do that over and over again. Especially it works in current, but I've seen it work on the lake many times too, where you're throwing a little bit of a loop down to your lure. It's tight, then it goes loose, then it goes tight again. If you get it reeled down quick enough, you can save a lot of lures like that.
Yeah, I usually just take my boat and I get a different angle.
Yeah, well, if you're in a boat, that's
if
helpful.
You're in a boat, you lose less.
Shout out to Bob Rederson for teaching me that, and when I was very young, and probably, like I say, saved me at least a few grand over a lifetime.
Well, and that's another nice thing about me making my own lures is that, for me to make a $50 lure, it probably cost me $10. And
Yeah.
$10 is a decent price for any lure, but it's just affordable. I mean, these my soft plastics, the hook is what costs all the money.
Yep.
Owner beast hooks aren't cheap, and sometimes I'll take I'll put a feather hook on the back of a walking bait or a popper or something like that, just to give it a little bit of, or even a willow spinner, on the back of a lipless crank. You just add just a little bit of length to it. I caught that 9-pound German brown on a lipless I painted as a shad, just a silver shad, but I put a willow blade on the back of it. And so it had sort of a swim action, and it was very shiny. So a lot of people, when they buy a bait, you can modify it. And I almost always replace the hooks, unless it's like a 6 cents or something like that, something, a higher end bait that has good hooks. But I will almost always change the hooks on a store-bought bait. I don't like them. You might get a hit, but you'll lose them because they spit it out. It's not sticky enough.
I do the same thing. I mostly for trout. Mix my own spoons. I like spoon fishing, so Netcraft or lure parts online. You're not molding like you do with the rubber, but you get the blanks and the split rings and the hooks you want. You can put a barrel swivel on the top to reduce line twists and catch more fish without breaking the line off. Kind of got started way back when with the Parker's rod and gun rack. He makes a great line of homemade lures or locally made lures that old man Parker kind of developed on the Williamson where he lived for a long time. And those are still available at Parker's Rod and Gun, but you can get those same blanks and put them together yourself at just twisting split rings all night long. And I end up spending about $2 a lure versus these days, 7 or 8. It makes it a lot easier I always tell people, you got to get down where the fish are. If you're afraid of getting snagged up, you're probably not getting down where the fish are in the rocks, and makes it a lot easier to do that when you're spending $2 or $3 a lure instead of 7 or 8.
Exactly. Yeah. I make my own spinners, inline spinners. Cost maybe $1. Maybe $1 it cost me to make an inline spinner, but you'll spend $4 or $5, $7 for an inline spinner in the store. But for $1, I mean, it's not that hard to make an inline spinner. and the parts are cheap. So I always just tell everybody, if you want to just, have a hobby, pick a type of bait and just start making it. And spinners, the most versatile bait that you can have in your tackle box is an inline spinner, because you can catch anything with that.